we're the most accomplished age group, in our 50s. We've done so much. We've looked after our children. They're growing up. We've done so well. We've done so many things. We are the experienced ones.
Yeah.
And we're the capable ones. We're the multitaskers.
Hi, I'm Jo Clark, and thanks so much for joining me today. This is the Redefining Midlife podcast, a podcast designed for the 40-plus woman who is determined to challenge society's myths and beliefs around midlife. It's for the woman who is inspired and ready to define midlife her way. Join me each week as I chat to health and wellness experts for up-to-date information on how to live well, as well as some special conversations with incredible everyday women redefining what midlife can look like. Here's to making our next half of life even better than the first.
Today, you'll be meeting the incredible Kirstie Smolenski. Now, she's a woman who has worn and continues to wear many hats. Wife, mum of 5, nurse, businesswoman, community organiser, and political candidate. And at the age of 56, Kirstie is also completing her law degree and beginning her nursing degree again. Now, she'll share more about that craziness during our chat. After hearing this quick snapshot about Kirstie, it's probably going to be easy for you to assume that she's always been an extroverted and ambitious woman. But as you'll hear, that wasn't always the case. Kirstie was very open during our chat and vulnerably shares the major turning points of her life that led her to course correct and change direction. Kirstie is a great example of don't just complain about it, do something about it, and be the change you want to see in life. And now that her 5 children have finished school, I just know that that extra time and space will mean that Kirstie's life will be ramping up rather than slowing down. For me, that is so inspiring and motivating and shows once again that you're never too old and it's never too late to redefine your life. You can find all the links to Kirstie in the show notes. But before we begin today's episode, I'd love to quickly send a very big thank you to the listeners who have recently rated the podcast. Gosh, it really does help the podcast to grow and reach more listeners who are just like you. And an extra big thank you to Mrs. P, who left a review on Apple Podcasts saying, "Jo, loved this episode on how to move forward when your baby chicks leave the nest. You made me realise that life doesn't stop because our kids no longer define who we are, but how exciting to have the opportunity to explore a new you." I so agree with you, Mrs. P. Now it's time for me to introduce you to the lovely Kirstie Smolenski and her special story. Welcome to the Redefining Midlife podcast, Kirstie. It is so lovely to have you on as a guest to share your midlife journey with us.
Oh, thank you, Jo. And it's so exciting to be here.
And this is your first podcast?
It is.
Oh, I love
New
that.
learning experience.
Well, why not do something new?
Exactly.
Now, in full disclosure to the listeners, I've known you for probably well over a dozen years now through meeting you at my daughter's boarding school. And in that time, I've seen you wear so many hats and take on lots of different roles. And it's done completely with competence, with confidence, and with grace. So I just want to acknowledge that as well, Kirst. So from an outsider's perspective, you've always had a strong social conscience and a drive to create change to make positive difference for others. Now, were you like that as a young girl at school?
Oh, gosh, no, absolutely not. And I think that this is where something like this and getting that reflection back from you, and I've certainly had that in the last few years, has made me go back and finding it confusing myself, because I was actually one of the shyest kids that you could ever come across. Someone new walking into the room, I would be behind my parents' legs. I couldn't stand that. I was very shy. I had no self-confidence. I was very friendly. I loved people, but I had no confidence in myself. Everyone I felt was better than I was. The girls were prettier, they were smarter. That was just not my lot in life. Yeah, for a long time.
So when did you start to notice a change?
Oh, wow. Well, I probably didn't really even notice the change. I think other people noticed it, especially my family, probably leaving school. I did go down to boarding school. That was incredibly confronting, but I loved it. I loved the newness. I loved the different friends and finding people from all over, parts of Victoria and southern New South Wales that I didn't really know existed. And I found that, and the friends and the parties. Yeah, I became a bit of a easily led party girl. So, I loved my school years for that.
Yeah.
School, I found difficult. I worked so hard, but I've always found academics, schooling difficult. And again, I just, wouldn't get the marks. Those things just weren't for me. Yeah, and then leaving school, going into a share house in Melbourne, that was, and starting my nursing, where you just had to walk into a room where you knew nobody. Really, I found a confidence, probably not a self-confidence. I masked that really well for a long time, still beyond that.
Is that right?
So it's really interesting how it's progressed.
And do you see that in any of your children?
I do, in perhaps one. I go back, I look at them, and I've always taught them the things that perhaps I wish I was taught, that, to really love yourself. There's, you're as good as anybody. There's absolutely no need for nerves or to be shy or anything, because we're all the same. No one's better. They might think they're better, but they're not. We're all the same. And I say that to my kids, and my kids have always, they've grown up with a self-belief and a self-confidence that, I wished I had as a child. It's very interesting to look back and see. And the one who I believe does lack the self-confidence and the self-belief, she's probably the most like me. And very interestingly enough, in her early 20s, we're going down that path of ADHD. And I believe that was myself, in an inability to concentrate and an inability to comprehend like others do. You believe that you're not as good academically. You believe that you're not as smart. And that's now another journey for me to be going through, especially with women, because women's sort of portrayal, or how they display an ADHD, is incredibly different to men.
Yes.
And we've just got men role models, really. We talk about boys with ADHD, and for women, for girls, it's very, very different. So I believe that was significant for me as a child, and I've just had to work through that myself and work out that, you know what, I'm not silly. Just because I can't spell properly doesn't mean that I'm stupid.
No.
So, and especially at boarding school, I'd write letters home and I'd get letters back with big red marks on them with all the spelling mistakes. Yeah. So actually I stopped writing home because I didn't like receiving them back with the pointing out that I couldn't spell. I still can't spell Joe. I'm still terrible at spelling. Terrible. And it's
I bet you
me,
hear that voice all the time.
I do. And people pick it up on my social media. You can't even spell this, or what have you. And it's taken me until I'm 56 years old to say that is not a measure of my intelligence. And we need to do something about this. And I love grammar.
That's everyone's best friend. So, because like confidence aside, that was something that took a bit of a hit, and like with most teenagers it does, but you also had obvious signs of neurodivergence as well. But were you ambitious as a teenager? Did you sort of have a burning ambition even when you went to Melbourne?
No.
Okay, that's interesting.
No. I was a dreamer. I was an absolute dreamer, which is very different from ambition. I would have loved to be all these sorts of people, but that was just a dream for me in those days. And I wanted, so my grandmother was a pharmacist, and she was one of the first female pharmacists to go through the Victorian College of Pharmacy. And she was my absolute role model. We were very alike. And I spent hours talking to her. And as a child, she used to take me over to the Shepparton, the Goulburn Valley Base Hospital, when she'd be babysitting me, and into the pharmacy, into the dispensary in the hospital pharmacy. And she gave me a job, and I'd count out iron tablets into the bottles of 20 to give out to patients. Like, imagine that. And so I wanted to be a pharmacist.
Yeah.
But I also felt from a very early age that I'd never get the marks at university to be a pharmacist. And my sister, my older sister, did. And I was very happy for her. And I thought, that's great. At least you're keeping that family thing going, because my great-grandfather was a pharmacist and my great-great-grandfather was also a pharmacist. And but I knew that was not for me. I think my wildest dream was to be a doctor, or something, more challenging, but yeah, was never going to happen for me. So that's probably why I was told by my family, oh, just do, nursing or teaching. That's what women do. And so I put nursing on my list when I finished grade 12. And I actually cried the day that I got accepted. Very unexpected. I remember it very well. I was in my father's supermarket working, and he gave me the letter from, whoever it was in those days. And I looked at it, and I'd been accepted into nursing at La Trobe University in Melbourne, and I cried thinking that's my lot in life, and I don't even know whether that's what I want to do. Yeah. I felt like it was nearly the end of my dreams. So yeah, it was very, very interesting.
Yeah.
And I found my training difficult. We were university trained. We were the first non-hospital. Everyone was against us. The community, the nurses, the hospital trained nurses, the students, everyone was against us. Oh, hospital trained. Oh,
I remember that time, actually, Kirstie. I remember, because I studied in Toowoomba at USQ. Oh, back then it was DDIAE, but that's when we started nursing as well, and that was away from the hospital trained and into there and what the people's opinions were.
Yeah, very, very strong. Close family friends. Still, I'd never do that. I'd still do it in the hospital. I can just hear them now. And then going into clinical. I remember in second year going into, our clinical situation at the Royal Melbourne. We were the worst of the worst. It was very difficult, and I thought, why am I doing this? I don't like these people. I don't like what they're doing. They don't like me. Why do I want to work with them? And I got to the stage that I almost quit at the end of second year. And funnily enough, it was one of my clinical teachers who said to me, oh, Kirstie, I think you'd just be better off being an enrolled nurse. You can't do this. And I thought, you know what? Stuff you.
That was a fire in the belly that you might have needed, huh?
I think so, and I thought, you know what? I might be this and I might be that, but I am no quitter. And I can do this. And perhaps, Jo, that was a bit of a turning point for me. And I did finish, and I took my badge. Well, we were all given badges in those days, and I threw it away. And I went to my first agency job as a registered nurse back at the Royal Melbourne. And I thought, I'm not telling one of you where I've trained. If you ask, I'll lie if I have to. But I can do this. I'm a good nurse. I don't care what you say. And off I went. Yeah.
So what was your early career path like, Kirstie? Given that, what was your early career path like? As in, where did you go after that? Did you stay for some time in Melbourne?
I stayed for 6 months in Melbourne, working with a nursing agency. So going to all different hospitals all over Melbourne. I said no to nothing. So I did a lot at the Royal Melbourne, the Prince Alfred, Prince Henry's in those days. And I learned so much, and I was very grateful for that time, because you're literally thrown into the deep end. And I met my first refugee, Vietnamese refugee there. That's also a very defining moment in my life. He couldn't speak English. He was in a big public hospital. No one could really communicate with him, and I tried hard, and I got this amazing story from him. He was a boat, refugee. He was, in those early days, probably in the 70s, he'd come across. I can't recall, but very defining moment in my life, and coming from a small country town. But then I went to Shepparton, Goulburn Valley base, for my grad year, and spent a year there, again batting off the, you're a hospital, you're a university trained, you won't be able to do anything. Increased that fire in my belly, I suppose, Jo. I did that for a year, and then a couple of girlfriends and I landed at the Toowoomba Base Hospital, wanting to see the world. Let's see Australia first. And landed in Toowoomba. Got jobs within the hour, basically, can you start tomorrow? And no joke. That's exactly what the director of nursing basically said to me in my interview. And another year there, and then again more confidence, and left for London, left for overseas.
Okay. And did you work as a nurse in London, or did you?
I did. I got my UK registration, and again another girlfriend was over there. And there were a few of us coming and going, and we both got our UK registrations, and I worked for an agency again in central London, working in big, busy London hospitals. It was fabulous. I loved every bit. And then we'd travel on our days off, and a few weeks here and there. And I think I really grew then as a person. I felt confident with knowing what I was doing. I felt like I was working in my role as a registered nurse to the very, the best I could, and I felt that was good. And getting a lot of feedback as well from, UK people loved Australian nurses. We were sought after because of our knowledge and our hard work. This is what they'd tell us. And our approach to people. We were very sought after. I loved it.
So what brought you back to Australia then? Was it just the visa time it ran out?
Well, that I could have stayed, having a grandparent who was English. I could have applied, I could have stayed. My parents came to visit me after I'd been away for over 2 years. And I thought, oh my, it just sort of jolted me back to reality. I thought, oh my goodness, you're looking old. Like, I must have been away a long time. And I started to miss Australia, whereas I hadn't before. And I thought, you know what, it's time to come home. And so I did. So I came home at the end of 1993 to Melbourne, started working in Melbourne again with an agency, started studying then as well, wanted to do my midwifery. And then it got cold, Jo. And then, in
you
May.
Just spent 2 years in London, for God's sake.
I know, but I think I was loving, and I probably had itchy feet as well. I was loving the heat. And then all of a sudden it got cold, and I thought, I'm not doing this. I'm not living in Melbourne back as a student. You had to do midwifery then through the university. So I was back to being a student. I was broke. I had this tiny little 1974 Chrysler Galant that was brown with a black vinyl roof. The Speedo was in miles. So, I thought, you know what? I'm broke. I'm a student. I'm cold. I'm living in this tiny little terrace house. And at the time, the Toowoomba Base Hospital was still doing nursing training in the hospital, and they were also offering a course, and it was called the Rural and Remote course, and they employed you full-time as a registered nurse, and at the end of it you would come out qualified as with accident emergency certificate, midwifery and ICU.
Mm-hmm.
And I was doing a lot of work in ICU, and I thought, oh, that's what I'm going to do. So I came back to Toowoomba. I got some accommodation, hospital accommodation. I started that course, and I then met my husband. So I didn't do it because that was the last thing I wanted to do, was go out rural and remote and let this gorgeous person that I'd just met back out in Toowoomba.
Wow. Okay. So after meeting Paul, you're a mum or parents to 5 children. So
yes.
Parenthood was obviously fairly strong on the list of.
Well, Jo, that's really interesting as well, because another rabbit hole. Sorry, I did not think I could have children.
Oh, is that right, Kirst? Wow.
That's right, and because I was very thin, I was a very skinny kid, and that sort of I filled out a bit in high school and then in uni life, but I rarely menstruated, so I rarely had a period. I could go for years, and nearly the whole time I was overseas, I didn't have a period. So when I met Paul, and we discussed this with family and my sister, and when I met Paul, I did say to him, and our relationship was serious. I said, you know what, I possibly can't have children. I don't ovulate, perhaps. And he sort of said, oh, well, that's how it is. That's okay with me, okay. So then when we decided to get married, I went on the pill because I thought, well, I probably need to be careful anyway. And my sister had lined up to give us eggs. And not that I really knew that I wanted to do that, but that was how, how the conversation was. So when we got married, I went off the pill whenever that cycle finished in the weeks before we were married. And then I came home from our honeymoon in Thailand pregnant. So
go you. You had ambitious ovaries after all. Look at that.
And again, Jo, I cried. I remember sitting in the kitchen of our little house that I bought in Toowoomba and seeing the stick and thinking, oh, I'm pregnant. I'm so not ready for this. I thought this would take years and years, and perhaps we would adopt when we were ready. And Eliza was born 9 months later, as Paul would say, made in Thailand. And so I had a child the same 12-month year that we were married. Very funny, very funny. And then thinking that she was a freak of nature, we tried again fairly soon, and I actually lost that child. And that confirmed my fears that there was something very quite wrong with my ability to reproduce, and that Eliza was perhaps a real freak of nature.
Yeah.
And so then actually got pregnant with Gillian very quickly after that. So that was confusing. Nearly all of a sudden we had 2 children, and maybe we should, while the going's hot, and I'm 30 something, because I didn't get married till I was 31. That was also against us. And all of a sudden, 18 months later, we had Rosie, and so I had 3 beautiful little perfect baby girls, and now I've worked out that nothing's wrong with me. And when Rosie was born, my father was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and which was incredibly traumatic. And I moved back down after the disease progressed to Victoria to nurse him at home so he could die at home. I'd been doing palliative care. I was a palliative care nurse then at St Vincent's, and he just wanted to die at home. So I said, I'll do that for you. So I took Rosie. Paul had the other two girls at home. I took Rosie as then probably a 10-month-old and went back home. The doctors were really good. I took him home from the palliative care unit in Melbourne. We set him up in his bedroom with his drip, with his little subcutaneous needle for morphine, with his nasogastric tube, probably getting a bit technical now, but he couldn't, anything he ate, he would vomit up. But he loved a beer. So I'd say, no worries, Dad, go hard, drink a beer with your mates, which he'd sit out there and drink a beer, and I would aspirate it out of the nasogastric tube on the side. So he then didn't bring that up. So he could actually sit there with everything else going on and have a beer with his mates. And I was giving him, 4th-hourly morphine, fentanyl patches. He basically wasted away, and he died. I could look after him, and he did die at home. He only became unconscious the morning that he died. So I could still do all his cares. He could roll over. I could, shave him and clean his teeth, and he could go to the bathroom. And until the morning that he died, and so we were able to then, I could recognise that okay, this was it, and we were able to get all the family, and he was able to be in his bedroom at home with all the family.
That's a special gift, isn't it, to do that to somebody?
It was the most extraordinary gift, Jo. Something that I still feel just so incredibly grateful that I was able to do that for, and not just my father, but for my family.
Yes.
And that they could be there. I didn't realise at the time the toll that it had taken on me personally. We moved back up to when it was all done and dusted, moved back to Queensland. Paul had come down with the other two children for the last few weeks, so we were all there together. Came back to Queensland, and I think, a few months later, about 6 months later, I said to Paul, I'm not over it. I'm depressed or sad. I need something really good in my life. I think I need another baby. and Paul's like, what? And I said, look, I feel like we need another baby.
Yeah.
And so we tried, and it didn't happen. And I thought, you know what, I'm too old. I'm 38 or whatever I was. And that's okay. And Paul had actually done some research into how you get boys and girls. So he'd stopped wearing underpants because apparently cooler testicles are better for producing boys. Yeah. And he felt being a tradie, being a builder outside, being hot and sweaty, that's why we had girls. We had Fred, and I was shocked out of my skin when he was born, thinking we'd have 4 beautiful daughters. That'd be perfect. Yeah. It's Fred. And I said to the obstetrician at the time, because we didn't ever find out, I said, are you sure? Are you sure? And he said, Kirstie, I've seen this a few times. And and it was Fred. And I immediately, Jo, thought, oh my goodness, that poor little boy, what have we done? He's got these 3 beautiful sisters who all play together, do everything together. And now I've got Fred, that poor little boy. He's going to be spoilt. He's going to be lonely. He's a couple of years younger. Wow, what have I done? He has to have a brother. And again, Paul's saying.
So you threw all of Paul's undies out again?
Exactly. And I said, look, I'm 39 years old. It won't happen. but I need to try. You regret what you don't do in life.
Yeah.
I need to try. I know that. And even if it's a little girl, Fred, it'll be beautiful. They'll be close in age, and Fred won't be the youngest and the only boy. And poor old Paul, he's just okay.
Different conversation to the one that you had prior to being married.
It was. And I bought myself a little ovulation kit where you can, it's about saliva, you lick it, and when it dries, you look through this little microscope thing and you see that you ovulate. I didn't believe it until I saw it. It was, you buy them from the chemist. And I rang him at work. It's time now. And 2 weeks later, I was pregnant.
Wow.
Yeah. Thinking that would never happen at 39.
Yeah.
And again, I didn't cry, but I thought, what have I done? You are not in the right mind. You're now going to have your 5th child at 39. Your poor husband's 41 or 42. And along came George.
Holy.
Gorgeous George the 5th, 10 pounds 5.
Oh, dear God, Kirst.
Dear God, yeah.
Holy.
He's the one that I needed to, I needed George to pull me up.
Job done.
Job done.
Job description before he was even born.
The funniest thing was when they handed him to me, and again, I've gone down a rabbit hole. I'm so sorry.
No, I love it.
The thing was when they, after that birth, where Paul says it was like, someone trying to pull a calf, when you get the chains on and get it, hitch it to the tractor and pull it out. He said, that obstetrician certainly had his work cut out trying to get George out. And I don't know where my mind was. They're not there. I was elsewhere.
My darling. Yep.
And when they then handed him to me in my probably near delirium, I looked at him and I said, "You little shit." And they very quickly took him back out of my arms. You can imagine the midwife, "Oh, I'll just hang on to this dear child for a while." So George has grown up knowing that he was a very, very large baby with a very, very large head. And his first words from his dear mother were, "You little shit."
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So, funny. We had all those conversations. One of the wardies at the time said to Paul, "Oh, he's going to be a front rower." And Paul said to him, "What makes you think it's a boy?" And this poor wardie nearly died. I said, "Paul, stop it. He's definitely a boy. I mean, look how ugly that is. No, girl."
So straight away, did Paul go in and have a vasectomy? Was he not willing to risk
actually
his wife?
It was actually, I got a bit, when George was about 6 months old, I got this gastritis. I knew it was a gastritis. I was so nauseous and so ill that I couldn't eat anything. I couldn't drink anything. And Paul came in and said, what can I do? What can I get you? And I said, just go to the shop, get me some Lucozade or some lemonade and some Mylanta, I don't know. Anyway, went down to the shop and he ran into a dear friend of ours who said to him, "Paul, what's wrong? You look terrible." And he got tears in his eyes and he said to Emma, "I think Kirstie's pregnant, but she's not telling me." And she's so... And Emma's like, calm down. We're in a public place. It's all right. Anyway, he did go and book himself in for a vasectomy straight away. He got the biggest shock of his life. I was not pregnant, Jo. No, I had gastritis. But he it frightened the living
I bet it
daylights
did.
out of me.
I bet it did. Oh my God. Now, so you've got 5 children now. Were you nursing? Did you fit in any of your professional career during all of this time as well,
I
Kirst?
did. I did. So
Wow.
after Eliza, I had plans to go back. At that time, I was in a charge position on the medical oncology, so cancer care, palliative
Yeah.
care unit at St Vincent's Hospital here in Toowoomba. I loved my job. I loved it. Had Eliza, planned to go back in 10 weeks. As a lot of us, new mothers will realise that, no, that is not going to happen. I'm not leaving this child.
Mm.
And I had a year off. I then went back while I was, pregnant with then Gillian, went back after Gillian. Before I had Rosie, I was asked by the university, USQ at that stage, to be if I would consider being a clinical facilitator.
Mm-hmm.
So I said, absolutely. So I went and worked as a clinical facilitator at USQ, taking first-year nursing students into their first placements, having full knowledge what I copped as a student, and full belief that I was going to make a huge difference to these kids' careers.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved it. I didn't do it for long because then I was quickly pregnant with Rosie.
Yeah.
But I do remember being very, very pregnant with Rosie, in the shower with one of our residents, with a student, still me trying to, tell them this is how it's done, and this poor student thinking, please don't give birth on the floor.
Yeah.
And then after Rosie was born, having those 3 children quite close together, that was the end, I felt, of my nursing career for a long while.
Yeah.
And then that's when my father got sick.
Gotcha.
And so that's when I did that. And then going back to palliative care for someone else I didn't feel I could do that. It had affected me, as I said. And then I got pregnant with Fred. So it wasn't for me. And I thought, I'm never going to get back to it. I did a bookkeeping course at TAFE so I could run Paul's business and be flexible with all the children.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's what I did. I took on all his books and basically managed his business.
So, Kirst, when did you start to study law? Because
2017. So I basically threw myself into, after George was born and even before then, so he was born in 2006.
Mm-hmm.
I then became incredibly involved with the schools and PNF. That would have been the time that I met you, Joe, and quickly became, secretary and spring fair convener and social convener, and really just kept saying yes to the positions that couldn't be filled. And by that stage, I was like, oh, I can do that. Yes, I can do that. No, that's, really. And I'm really grateful for the person who actually asked me to become the secretary of the Fair Home PNF, because I don't think I would have put my hand up for that just willy-nilly. But I was invited, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. And it was such an amazing experience. And so Paul was building and selling. That was his own business. We were engaging with real estate agents as well as part of our business of building and selling. And then I felt, well, I can do that too. Why don't I take on this? So this had sort of happened gradually, I suppose.
Yes.
And I thought, well, I'll do that too. That I can fit that in as part of our business. I'll sell the real estate. So I did my real estate course. I got my license. I went to work with Century 21 with Sam Marsden here in Toowoomba. And probably the first year, because it was all new, and I was very busy. I loved it, but probably a bit too busy with all the kids. And it is all consuming. Selling real estate is all consuming. It's 7 days a week. People don't realise just how hard real estate agents work. And I took on jobs for friends and other people who I knew, and then that sort of grew. I decided that, no, that wasn't for me. If anything, I needed to have my own business so I could just do what I wanted. So I started up my own little business probably in 2016 and worked out very, very quickly that I was not a home alone, work in the home office person. I missed that, being out with, working with other people, even though I was with clients all the time. I worked out that that wasn't me, and that, okay, what do I do now? I've got to this stage in my life that kids are growing up. Paul's talking about not doing it anymore, and maybe getting a job as a supervisor, because running your own building business is incredibly difficult. Difficult. It's fraught with danger. And as we know now, we can see the aftermath, and so many builders have gone broke, and it is fraught with danger. So I thought, maybe it's time. And that little person from my school days came back, with my dreams of not just being a doctor, but, I liked the idea of law, politics, accounting. I had a lot of role models in my head from those days. And I thought, you know what? I completely discounted law, even though it fascinated me, because I didn't think I was smart enough. So you know what? I'm going to apply for my 50th birthday present. I'm going to apply. And I did, and I was accepted. And again, I didn't cry, but I nearly fell over backwards. Like, how are they accepting a 49-year-old girl who hasn't studied since the 80s? Wow. And off I went.
Good on you.
And I had a computer, obviously, and with real estate and what I'd been doing, I had a good, way around with words and writing, letters and using the computer and Word docs. And I wasn't incredibly green. My kids did have to teach me, ×2 spacing and margins and, Grammarly.
So during that time as well then, Kirstie, so you're studying your law. You've also run for local council and as an independent in the last federal election. So
Yep. And
what has all of that experience taught you about politics and yourself during this time?
Well, such a huge learning curve. And I suppose, Jo, from now, we can really look back and see that everything for me and for probably most people has been a steep learning curve. And for me, in those initial school years and having to, sink or swim after school, and then with my nursing, and then I suppose with my real estate and P&F, really just working hard to get the job done and learning so many things about the community, because we were so engaged with the children and everything that they were doing, sport, music, their different schools. We were there. We were everywhere. And learning all the time about this community, also with our building, learning the flaws, and then starting law and realizing the legal side of it and the boundaries and what's wrong with our society. What I felt were the hurdles, so many hurdles in our society. I felt this needs to be changed. Again, I was just putting my hand up. If we need, we need help. We need counsellors on council who know the community, who know what they're doing, and people who are here to facilitate change for the better, not just because mum or dad's been famous or because I want a job because I can't do anything else. And I'm not being critical of the ones who are there, but I felt we needed change, and I felt we needed progressive change, and we needed it quickly. And that was, it all sort of came together with me running for election for the Toowoomba Regional Council in 2020. Having all of that experience and knowledge, just, you know, and me realising that I can do this.
Yeah.
I'm not silly. I'm actually
Yes.
doing a law degree. You know, I'm not silly. I can do this. Why not me?
Yeah.
And that was where that began. And then COVID hit. So we were all shut down. We couldn't really, we couldn't campaign. And I loved campaigning. I loved, you know, meeting the people and hearing what they had to say. That all shut down. And look, the incumbents and a few others who had spent, you know, 10 times more than me were elected. And that was also a very, very steep learning curve for me when I realised just how much money you needed to spend to be elected. And again, Joe, I'm thinking women, breadwinners, and not just that, how many capable people are out there who haven't got $50,000 to spend on an election campaign? Is that nearly everybody? So again, opened up all these questions and flaws in our current political system, led me to the realisation that since Federation Groom had our local member had been a white male conservative.
Yeah.
And I was really like, what the heck?
Yeah.
Really? We're better than this as a society. Where are all the women? Yeah. And off I went for the federal election as an independent.
Yeah.
One, we need to break the shackles. We need to shine a light on Groom because we're just in this forgotten conservative backwater. And I'm not saying anything about the Conservatives. I'm talking about the lack of change. The same Conservative government, you know, representative every year, which is why we don't attract the funding to our region. Yeah, so it just took me off on that next tangent of need, and it's another steep learning curve. And here we are.
You're enjoying that? You're enjoying
I
exploring
loved
that?
it.
Yeah.
I loved every bit. I devoured it. And the more I learnt and the more I understood politics and the political process and how people are elected and why, just thought, no wonder, you know, so many people don't have a good thing to say about politicians. You can't trust a politician. They're all the same. No wonder, Joe. You know, we need to change this narrative if we want good governance, and our governance at a federal level, you know, comes from having someone on the ground who knows the community, understands the community, and understands what the community needs. And we're not always getting that.
Yeah.
Because of the party system. It's very, you know, big corporate donations. Let's not even go there.
Yeah.
Let's start electing people who are the best for the job.
Well, you live life with so much passion, Kirstie, and for some, the whole thought of politics would just about turn their blood cold. But for you, it's lighting another fire, isn't it? It's sort of lighting that fire again in your belly.
Joe, that's actually been, and again, thank you for that self-reflection of me, and that has been said to me by a couple of other politicians in the past few years. And that's been learning for me, like, yes, oh my goodness, I hadn't even realised that. Hadn't even realised it is like a fire in my belly. And the dirtier that they get, the more I say, bring it on. And the difference, again, between myself now and that small child could not be more different, Joe. Where was the true me then? And that's where I come back, you know. Perhaps I self-confidence is a thing with children.
It is. It is. And can't you see, like, as you get older too, that the confidence that grows with more experience that you've got, life experience.
Yeah.
And my God, a woman in the middle of life, if you've got to throw in a little bit of meno rage as well, Kirst,
I possibly have.
Those men better go running.
Well, this is it. Jo, when I was running for the federal election, I set up a stall at the local farmers markets, and one older gentleman, I knew who he was, a stalwart of the Liberal Party in Toowoomba, has been for a long time, came along and introduced himself and said, "Oh, I congratulate you," nearly condescendingly, "I congratulate you for what you're doing. A woman and an independent that's never been heard of in this region." And he said, I admire you and would possibly vote for you, except for this reason. And he pointed to Fred and George, my sons, who were sitting behind the table at the pop-up that we had. And I looked at Fred and George, who would have been maybe 16 and 17 at the time, maybe 15 and 17 at the time. And I said, "Boys, Fred, George, stand up for a minute, please." And at 6'5" and 6'3", despite them being, teenagers, they both had to get out from under the pop-up to stand up. And I said to this man, "These boys do not need me to wipe their bottom at the moment." And saying that, they also have a father who can do that if need be. And he just walked away. And I just thought, that's what I'm up against.
Yeah.
It's sexist.
Yeah.
You're a woman, you're older, you've got children, God forbid, you've got children, get home and look after them. I just thought, wowee, man, did that light a fire.
That's probably the best thing he could have said then. He might have been the gift that you needed.
Another one, I agree with you, because it was a spotlight on that part of the community, and that's what I was able to address.
Yeah.
And then we're coming back to you and what we're talking about here, and your podcasts about women and women's health and wellness, and it all ties in where we're often told throughout our lives by certain people, get back to the house and after you.
Off you go. Yeah.
And yet we're the most, and yet I consider now to be, we're the most accomplished age group, in our 50s. We've done so much. We've looked after our children. They're growing up. We've done so well. We've done so many things. We are the experienced ones.
Yeah.
And we're the capable ones. We're the multitaskers.
Oh, that's what I was saying to another guest on the podcast not long ago, Kirstie. It's almost like our responsibility. It was something that generations before us didn't have the opportunity that we've got now. So to use our voice in a way to lift up others and to make change, I think if you've got that opportunity, and for me, I'm lucky enough that I've got that opportunity, then I see it as something that I should do. Not I could do, but I should do.
Oh, Jo, when I started my campaign for federal politics, so as an independent in Groom, I read a quote, or someone perhaps sent it to me, I can't remember, and I think it was, I think it's Helen McCullough. Now, I might be wrong there, but it was basically about saying, if you can, you should. And that's exactly what you've just said. Not everyone can stand up. Not everyone has a strong voice, or not everyone likes standing up in front of hundreds, thousands of people, having that microphone and saying what you have to say. That they couldn't think of anything worse. But because you can, Yeah, you should, because then you're the voice for all those people who can't. And certainly I had a lot of supporters through the campaign who were exactly that person. They'd say, I could never do what you're doing. That it frightens me so much to think that I'd have to stand on a stage with a microphone in front of those people, media included. I just want to support you because you can. And I realized then, Jo, that I actually enjoyed that. Give me the microphone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I enjoy it. Give me that big room full of people. I really enjoy it.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm with you with that on that one too.
Yeah, look at you. Thousands of people listening to what you have to say.
Now,
Yeah, it's empowering.
it is empowering. It is empowering. Now, after 7 years of study and you graduate from law this year, at the same time, you've got all of that in the background that we've just discussed.
Yes.
You also have another hat that you've managed to fit firmly on your head. You're also studying your nursing degree again. And I'll say the word again, from scratch, even though you've already received that qualification years ago, all those years of practice in a hospital and as a nurse educator. Now, we don't have much time left on this episode, but I'd love you can you explain to the listeners why that is the case, why you have to study your nursing degree again?
Well, I have to study it again because if you're a registered nurse and you haven't been registered for 10 years, then you lose everything. You lose your qualification, you lose your so you can keep your registration going if you want to and not work. Well, you have to do a minimum amount of work. I'm not sure how many shifts per week that is. And then you also need to be reading your journals and whatnot and be proving to the registration board, APRA, that you can be re-registered year after year. And it's quite expensive. And after 3 years of doing that, I felt that, okay, I can't do this anymore. I'm too busy. My life's gone on a different tangent. So I hadn't been registered for over 10 years. So I've lost everything. Registration. So if you do want to work as a nurse again, you have to start from scratch. So you may as well be a 17-year-old finishing high school. So no prior learning, nothing, a complete full degree once again. I hadn't quite realised that when I started down that path of perhaps, doing that, working a bit as a registered nurse as well. And the more I delved into it, the angrier I got, Jo, and another fire in my belly. It's a profession dominated by women, Jo. Immediately I felt that this was terrible. It was some sort of discrimination. Surely this is not correct. Surely this is not necessary. And so I applied. I got accepted. I did start at USQ while I deferred my law. I then needed to complete my law, so I transferred out to Central Queensland Uni. So that's how that happened. And I'm now working as an assistant in nursing, as well as working for Roger Grigg as a practice nurse. And it's, the shortage in registered nurses, that fire just keeps growing. We need registered nurses. All of Australia needs registered nurses. We are so short, Jo. It is crippling our health system in some circumstances. And the universities just aren't filling the gaps for whatever reason that is. So I believe that older, experienced nurses like me should not be barred from practicing. We should be enabled to get back into the profession. And certainly the prospect of doing a 3-year degree is prohibitive to most. I've got to do weeks of unpaid clinical practice. So again, I feel that, well, I've got to complete this degree to actually have the knowledge to go back to APRA to go back to our government, whoever that will be at the time, and say, this is ridiculous. I've done it. I didn't need to do it. I haven't even worked for 20 years as a registered nurse, let alone 10. We need to change this.
Yep.
So that's part of my focus, is that, as well as really loving getting back into nursing. So I'm very torn now. I don't know what to do with something, hopefully with law and nursing, maybe in ethics I can, or education, because I love my education too. Hopefully I'll be able to tie both in together. Yeah, but it's another fire. No, this is something that is wrong.
Yes.
And needs to change for the benefit of Australia and our health system. And as we, growing older, our population is growing older, and our disease rate is also growing with obesity, diabetes, renal problems, dementia. It's the rate of dementia, cancer rates, some are falling, others are growing. We need registered nurses on the ground, and this is completely prohibitive for someone like me with my experience to, be told, no, you start again with the 17-year-old straight out of school.
Yeah, no, it seems crazy. You could imagine. I know some things would have changed 10 because it's a fast growing area, but
that's
there
right.
are so many things that would stay the same.
The same. And Jo, that's exactly my stance. So the medications have changed, the treatments have changed. We've got extra diagnosis, we've got different laws, we've had the royal commissions, there's different ways of doing things. On the other side of it, people haven't gone out and grown an extra arm. I'm still nursing the same body in the same way, with that care and compassion and everything that nurses do, which is critical thinking, assessment, planning. We're nursing exactly the same way. We need a refresher. We need a paid, that's my opinion now, coming out as my opinion, we need a paid refresher in a hospital for however many months to get us up to speed and pay us as an assistant in nursing while we're doing it. And I feel that would help the nursing shortage a great deal.
What a wasted resource that we've just got sitting there that you can't use and access. It just seems ridiculous. So, Kirstie, we've talked with some of the questions that I had to finish us off. We've basically covered a lot of those because I was, what are you looking forward to? Well, you've told me so many different things that you're really looking forward to and you're wanting to do. There's lots of spot fires. I think Paul better have his extinguisher behind you everywhere you go, my friend.
Can I tell you that he's now building or renovating a house on Stradbroke Island? He's like, get me out of here.
Kers, what advice would you give to another midlife woman?
Oh,
I mean, that's broad, I know. What advice would you give?
No, but powerful. That believe in yourself. Find your passion that has sometimes been buried behind all sorts of things from might be your upbringing, or you might have that little, you might be neurologically diverse. Find your passion and draw on your experiences, through that you've had through your life, and bad experiences can teach us the best lessons. Write them down, find what you're good at, and have the self-belief that you are a very, very accomplished, powerful person, and you're very much needed in this world at the moment. Very much needed. We are peaceful when we compare ourselves to males. We are the peacemakers. We are the homemakers. We are the multitaskers, and put us in those positions with all that experience and capability behind us. Go hard.
Yeah.
That's what you want.
Not
everyone does.
No, I mean, there's decades left for you to work on that, isn't it? That's we're only just starting, really, Kirstie.
Yeah, it's nearly like that. I'm, turning 57 next month, and I'm like, that's not long enough. No, I've got decades to me.
Yeah. And that's
be
why
following up.
we really need to rethink, and that's why I called it redefining midlife, because once upon a time, you'd think, 50s and 60s, that's when you wind down. And I'm thinking, no, that's when we can ramp up. We can be whatever we want it to be with
and
that
Jo,
experience behind us.
Yes, and how many times are we told that though?
Yeah.
And how many times are we told that now, even now with what I do, like, oh, you're doing what? Why? Wouldn't you rather be retiring? No. I couldn't think of anything worse.
Yeah.
No, but I think that's nearly indoctrinated into us as women. But no, let's keep this going and empower more women to do the same. And one thing that I have learned, and it hasn't happened to me and it won't in my relationship, but so many women give up their own careers, Jo. When they have families, they give up their careers. I gave up mine to help to bring up my children and to work in my husband's business. If something then happens to that relationship, I would have been left with 5 children.
Yeah.
After not being registered for 10 years without a qualification. I would like to give, just speak to people younger than me in their 20s and 30s and having children. Consider not giving up your qualification. Just think about it.
Yeah.
Because I think so many women do. The men continue on in their job often after this breakup. And it's one of the reasons that older women is the fastest growing demographic of homelessness in Australia.
It's a shocking statistic, isn't it? When you hear
shocking.
It is. Well, being an example and showcasing different ways that we can do midlife and what it can look like is a passion of mine, just to put it out there. And like you were saying, find your passions, no matter where it might be. Acknowledge your upbringing and any issues that you might have of lack of self-belief, or but draw on those experiences. Have that self-belief. That's really the big takeaway.
Yeah. And there's that saying that everyone uses about the old woman, and I think menopause, that's what you've done so beautifully. But I realize now, just another challenge, get that sorted. We're getting better at getting that sorted if we can. It might be a hurdle, but it's one we can get over and continue on with.
Yep, that's exactly it. Now, Kirstie, last question. What do you hope 80-year-old Kirstie is going to say about current day Kirstie?
Well, I'm hoping she's going to say, girl, you exhaust me. Thinking about you.
Put those bloody fires out.
And then as I sit here and I've narrowed my lanes down to whatever that might be, and I sit here, working diligently on one or two issues, having an incredibly satisfied life. Yes, you exhaust me, but thank you for, doing what you did when I had the ability. Yeah. I hope I'm sitting on the beach somewhere, or still being able to work on my laptop and still being very contributing to society in a very meaningful way. That's what I hope, and I'll be thankful for me now for enabling me to do that.
Of that I have no doubt. Thanks so much for your time today, Kirstie. I've thoroughly enjoyed our conversation. We've travelled a lot of different roads and paths, and thank you for sharing.
Oh, my pleasure, Jo.
All right. See you later, Kirstie.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much for listening and sharing your time with me today. I'd love you to hit subscribe on Apple Podcast or your favourite podcast app to keep spreading these empowering messages. Please share this podcast with other incredible midlife women in your world. Join me again next week for another redefining midlife conversation. Thanks again for tuning in.